Address to Mary, gentlemen, let not think you dismay. For Jesus Christ our Saviour was born on Christmas Day, to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy.
Marley was dead. To begin with. There's no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, the chief mourner, Scrooge. Scrooge had signed it. And Scrooge's name was good in the city for anything he cared to put his hand to. No, Marley was dead. Dead as a doornail. Mind you, I don't know what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might be inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but no. Marley was dead. Scrooge knew he was dead? Well, of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, his sole mourner. Not that Scrooge was too deeply cut up about the sad event. He never even painted out Marley's name. There it yet stood, years afterwards, Scrooge and Marley. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, was old Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, as hard and sharp as flint, and as silent and as self-contained and as solitary as an oyster. No one ever came up to him in the street to say to him with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see us?" No beggar ever implored him for a trifle. No children ever asked him what o'clock it was. No man or woman ever once in all his life asked Scrooge the way to such and such. And even the blind men's dogs seemed to know him. When they saw him coming on, they would tug their owners into doorways, up alleys. But what did Scrooge care? It was all the same to him. It was what he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all good days of the year, upon a Christmas Eve, Scrooge was busy at his desk, counting money. It was bleak, biting, foggy weather. The city clocks had just struck 4, but it was already quite dark. The fog came pouring in through every chink and keyhole, and it was so dense that the houses opposite looked like mere phantoms. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, so that he might keep his eye on his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who was copying letters in a dismal little cell beyond. Scrooge's fire was very small, but the clerk's was so very much smaller that it looked like just one coal. But he couldn't replenish it because Scrooge kept the coal box in his room. And so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. So Bob put on his long white scarf, tried to warm himself by his candle, in which effort, not being a man of a strong imagination, he failed. Suddenly, the door burst open. It was Fred, Scrooge's nephew, who had so heated himself walking through the fog and the frost that he was all of a glow. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle Bob," said Scrooge. "Humbug. What did you just say, Uncle? Christmas at humbug. You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry?"
What reason have you to be merry? You're poor. What reason have you to be dismal, Uncle? You're rich. Humbug. Oh, don't be cross. Uncle, what else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this is? Merry Christmas. Out upon a Merry Christmas. What's Christmas to you but a time for paying bills without money? Finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer. If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with a Merry Christmas on his lips would be boiled with his own pudding and buried with the stake of holly through his heart. Uncle, nephew, let me keep Christmas my way and you keep it yours, but you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you. It's never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, but I'm sure I've always thought of Christmas time when it has come round as a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The one time in the year that I know of that men and women open their closed-up hearts freely and look on those below them as fellow passengers to the grave. No, it has done me good, and I believe it will do me good, and I say, God bless it. Little Bob Cratchit in his cell beyond involuntarily applauded. Let me hear another sound out of you, sir, and you'll keep Christmas by losing your job. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament. Oh, Uncle, don't be cross. Come. Dine with us tomorrow. Scrooge said he would first see Fred in hell. He really did. But why, Uncle? Why? Why did you get married? You have no money. Because I fell in love. Because you fell in love. Good afternoon. I want nothing from you, Uncle. I ask nothing of you. We've had no quarrel that I've been a party to. Why can we not be friends? So I say, a Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon. And a Happy New Year. Bob Cratchit saw Scrooge's nephew out, and in so doing, he let in two other people, portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, who now stood in Scrooge's office with their hats off and books and papers in their hands. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Do I have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago, this very night. No doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner. Mr. Scrooge, some of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor and the destitute who suffer so terribly at this time of year some food and drink and means of warmth. Thousands, no, hundreds of thousands of people go without the bare necessities of life, to say nothing of ordinary comforts. Are there no prisons? Well, yes, plenty of prisons. And the union workhouses, are they still in operation? Well, very busy, sir. Thank God, I thought from what you were saying that something had occurred to stop them in their useful operation. They scarcely provide Christian cheer of mind and body. Sir, what may I put you down for? Nothing. You wish to remain anonymous? I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I support the prisons and the workhouses. They cost enough, and those who are needy must go there. Many of them can't go there. Many of them would rather die. Well, if they'd rather die, they better do it and decrease the surplus population. Good afternoon, gentlemen. There being no point whatever in continuing with the conversation, the gentleman withdrew. And while all this was going on, the fog and the darkness had so thickened that the ancient tower of the church just outside, whose gruff old bell had peered slyly down on Scrooge, who many a year became invisible and struck the hours and the quarter hours from the clouds, as if its teeth were chattering in its head. The cold was intense, piercing, biting, searching cold. A young lad came by, his nose glowing bright red from the cold, and stooped down in front of Scrooge's letterbox to regale him with a Christmas carol.
God rest you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. For Jesus Christ our Saviour was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power.
You'll be wanting all day tomorrow, I suppose, Cratchit? If I were to stop you £5 for it, you'd feel yourself mighty ill-used, I'll be bound. But you don't think me ill-used for paying a day's wages for no work. Well, it is just the once a year, sir. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. Be here all the earlier the next morning. At last, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. Bob Cratchit slid all the way down the ice on Cornhill 20 times in honour of its being Christmas Eve, and then ran all the way home to Camden Town, which is quite a way, I can tell you, as hard as he could pelt, to play at blind man's buff. Scrooge went home to bed.
He lived in chambers which had once been Marley's, in a building up a yard where it had so little business to be, you couldn't help thinking it must have run there as a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, because only Scrooge lived in it. The yard was so dark and foggy that Christmas Eve that Scrooge, who knew every stone, had to grope his way along with his hands until he reached the door.
Now, it's a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on that door, except for its being very large. It's also a fact that Scrooge had seen it morning and night, year in and year out, all the time that he was in that place. And also that Scrooge had about him as little of what is called imagination as any man in the city of London, and that's saying something. So let any man or woman explain to me how it came about that when Scrooge put the key in the lock of the door, he saw not a knocker, but the face of Jacob Marley. Marley. It looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, its ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The face was a livid colour, with a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a cellar. The face was not angry or ferocious, but the eyes were wide open and perfectly motionless. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it became a knocker again. "Humbug," said Scrooge. "Pooh, pooh," and he closed the door. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened of echoes. He fastened the door, and he went up the stairs. Up he went, not caring a button for its being very dark. Darkness was cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he closed the heavy door of his chambers, he went all through his rooms, hallway. Sitting room. Bedroom. Nobody under the bed. Nobody in the closet. No one in the dressing gown, which hung up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Quite satisfied, Scrooge closed the door and locked it. Double locked it. He took off his cravat, put on his slippers, his nightcap, and he sat down by his very low fire to take gruel from a little tin saucepan. As he leaned back in his chair, his eye lighted on a bell, a disused bell hanging on the wall. As he looked at it, the bell jolted into life, swinging back and forth, back and forth. Now there were bells ringing all over the house, but the house was empty. And what was that clanking noise? It seemed to come from the cellar, as if some person were dragging heavy chains over stones. Up the stairs it came, straight towards his door. Marley, the very same. His spectacles on his forehead, his long tailed coat, his usual waistcoat, his tights, his boots. A long chain wound itself about him like a tail. It was made up of keys, padlocks, cash boxes, heavy purses wrought of steel. The ghost walked over and sat on the chair opposite the fireplace, as if it was quite usual.
Why are you in chains, Jacob?
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it myself, link by link, yard by yard. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob. Business. Mankind should have been my business. The common welfare, mercy, charity, benevolence, Ebenezer. I've sat invisible at your side many and many a day. Do you want to know the weight and length of the chain that you bear, Ebenezer? But speak comfort to me, Jacob. I have none to give. My time is nearly gone. Listen to me, Ebenezer. I am here tonight to tell you that you have yet a hope and a chance of escaping my fate. Thank you, Jacob. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. I think I'd rather not, if you don't mind, Jacob. Expect the first tomorrow night, when the bell tolls 1. Expect the second, the night after that, at the same hour. The third. Expect the third, the day after that, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. The apparition moved backwards from Scrooge, and every step it took, the window lifted itself a little, so that by the time it reached it, the window was wide open, and the phantom floated out onto the dark, bleak night. Desperate with curiosity, Scrooge went to the window. The air was thronged with phantoms, many of them known to Scrooge in their past lives. All were in chains. Some few were linked together. Guilty governments, perhaps. None was free. Scrooge closed the window. He went to examine the door by which the ghost had entered. double-locked, just as he'd locked it with his own hands. And the bolts were undisturbed. Humbug! Scrooge went directly to bed, without undressing, and fell into sleep at an instant.
God rest you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay, for Jesus Christ our Saviour was born on Christmas Day.
When Scrooge awoke, he lay in bed, endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes. The bell tolled 12. But it was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock must be wrong. An icicle must have got into it. As he lay behind the curtains of his bed, Scrooge thought of his encounter with Marley's ghost. Thought and thought it over and over, but nothing could he make of it. The more he thought about it, the more perplexed he became. Was it a dream or not? And then, on a sudden, he recollected that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. A 12:15. Half past. A 1:45. 1 o'clock. The hour itself, and nothing but. Scrooge sat up in his bed with his knees up against his chest and watched in terror as the curtains of his bed were drawn back by a hand. Yes, a hand. And he found himself face to face with a very strange figure, like a child, well, more like an old man, diminished to the proportions of a child. Its hair, which hung around its shoulders and down its back, was white, as if with age. But the face had not a wrinkle on it. But this was not the strangest thing about the figure. It fluctuated, being now a thing with 1 arm, now with 1 leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body. Who or what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
Long past?
Your past.
What is your business with me?
Your welfare.
Scrooge couldn't help thinking that a night's unbroken rest might have been more conducive to that end. But the spirit must have heard him thinking it, because it said,
Your salvation. Then, come. Give me your hand.
The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. The spirit drew Scrooge towards the window. Spirit, I am a mortal and liable to fall.
Bear but a touch of my hand. Here.
And they went, not through the window, but through the wall. But where were they? Scrooge, still in his nightgown, his nightcap, and his slippers, looked around him. The yard, all the other buildings, and the entire city had vanished. The fog and the darkness had vanished too. Now they were walking through the snow upon a country lane. White fields were on either side of them. "Good heavens, Spirit," said Scrooge. "I know this place. I grew up here. I was born here." A cart rattled by, filled with noisy lads, roaring out Christmas songs. I know those boys, every one of them. I could name them all. He knew every tree, every post, every gate, the bridge, the church, the winding river.
You remember them?
Remember them? I could walk it blindfold.
And yet you forgot it for so many years. Strange. Come with me. I have more to show you.
Now they found themselves in a schoolroom. It was empty but for one solitary boy sitting there.
You know who this boy is?
I do.
Where are all the other boys?
All gone home for the jolly Christmas holidays.
And you?
But before he could answer, a girl younger than the boy came in.
Ebenezer,
Fan, what are you doing here?
I've come to bring you home, dear Ben.
Home?
Yes, home. Father's so much kinder than he used to be that I was not afraid to ask him if you might come home, and he said, yes, you should, and he sent me in the carriage to fetch you.
My sister, Fan, was always such a delicate creature. A breath would have withered her. She died still a young woman, leaving a child.
Your nephew?
Yes, my nephew, Fred.
You're never having to come back to this school ever again. And we're going to spend the whole Christmas together and have the merriest time in all the world.
They abruptly left the classroom and the countryside behind them and found themselves in the thoroughfares of a great city. It was Christmas time here, too, and it was evening. The Spirit stopped in front of a certain warehouse. They peered in through the windows. Come on, clear away. Let's have lots of room here. It's Fezziwig. It's old Fezziwig. Come alive again. Put the pen down. Ebenezer, no more work tonight, boy. It's Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve. Scrooge's 17-year-old self leapt into action. Floors were swept and watered. Lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped on the fire. And the warehouse became as warm and snug and dry a ballroom as you might desire to see upon a winter's eve. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came the three Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 suitors whose hearts they had broken. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid and her cousin the baker. In came the cook and her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In they all came, one after another. Some shyly, some boldly, some sadly, some gladly, some pushing and some pulling. In they all came, one after another. And away they all went to 20 couple at once. Hands half round. And back the other way. All throughout this, Scrooge was there with his 17-year-old self. He remembered everything. He underwent a state of joyous agitation. Well, after that, there were more dances, and then there were forfeits, and more dances, and a plum pudding, and a pot of negus, whatever that might be, but everybody drank it, and there was a piece of cold roast, and a piece of cold boiled, and then old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig stood up to dance. A positive light seemed to shine out of Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance. You couldn't have predicted at any one time what would become of them next. And then, when old Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig had gone through all the stages of the dance, Fezziwig cut. He cut so deftly that he seemed to wink with his legs. Well done, everyone. Well done, said Fezziwig. Well done, Fiddler. Well done, Ebenezer. Well done. Well, there were more dances after that, but when the clock struck 11, the dancing came to an end, and Fezziwig and Mrs. Fezziwig took their station by the door to wish each of their guests individually a Merry Christmas. The two apprentices, Dick and Ebenezer, as they settled down for their night's sleep under the counter, poured out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig.
A small matter, said the ghost, to make these silly folk so happy.
Small? Said Scrooge.
Yes, small. He spent, what, 2-3 pounds of your mortal money. Is that so great that it deserves this praise?
No, it's not that. Spirit, he has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service burdensome or light, a pleasure or a toil. His power lies in words and looks and things so slight and insignificant you can't add them up or count them. It's nothing to do with money.
Oh, really? I see. Come with me. My time grows short. I have much to show you.
Again, Scrooge saw his former self, a little older now, in the first flush of manhood. Next him, a pretty young woman. There were tears in her eyes. It will mean little to you, Ebenezer, very little. But we must part. Part? Why? I've been replaced. Replaced? By what? By the love of money. When you and I first knew each other, we never had any money. But money was never the meaning of our lives. Well, you see, I've grown a lot wiser since then. Belle, I've discovered that the one thing the world never forgives is poverty. You want to be poor, Belle? When we first promised ourselves to each other, but I was just a boy. Well then, for the love of the sweet boy that you once were, I release you with a full heart. May you be happy in your chosen life.
Spirit, said Scrooge, why do you delight to torture me? Show me no more. Conduct me home. I am simply showing you what your life has been. Do not blame me that it is what it is. No, haunt me no longer. Scrooge furiously launched himself at the spirit, which had now become just a head without a body. As he looked at it, the face seemed to become in rapid sequence Fan, Dick Wilkins, Mr. Fezziwig, Mrs. Fezziwig, the fiddler, Belle.
And then it was gone. Scrooge was abruptly conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and also of being in his own bedroom. He barely had time to reel back to his bed before he fell into a heavy sleep. Scrooge awoke in the midst of a prodigiously tough snore and sat up to get his thoughts together. He was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, so that nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. But being prepared for almost anything, he was by no means prepared for nothing. So when the bell tolled 1, and no shape appeared, he fell into a violent fit of trembling, until he became aware of a glow and a roar that seemed to be coming from the direction of his sitting room. So he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers towards the door.
Ebenezer Scrooge. Come in, man.
Well, it was his sitting room, all right. There was no doubt about that. The walls and the ceiling were hung with holly and mistletoe. A mighty blaze was roaring up the chimney, such as had never been seen in Scrooge's time, nor Marley's. In the center of the floor was turkeys, game, joints of meat, long wreaths of sausages, sucking pigs, puddings, great barrels of oysters, and seething jugs of punch. But lolling on this mountain of food, as if upon a throne, was a giant. In its hand, a glowing torch.
Come, man. Know me better. Come with me. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Touch my robe.
Scrooge, who was no longer the dogged Scrooge he had been, did as he was told. He followed the giant, with its great green robe bordered with fur, its bare chest, its huge naked feet, and its wreath of holly on its head. He could not resist. After walking Scrooge through the bustling Christmas streets, the spirit led him down a nameless turning. Before long, they found themselves on the threshold of a little four-room dwelling. Whose house is this, Spirit? Said Scrooge. As if in reply, in came little Bob Cratchit, 3 foot of scarf exclusive of fringe hanging down before him, and his threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable. Upon his shoulders was his little son, Tiny Tim. The boy held a crutch in either hand, and his little limbs were encased in iron frames. But the moment the boy was down from his father's shoulders, two very young and very noisy Cratchits bore him off to the wash-house that he might hear the Christmas pudding singing in the copper. How did little Tim do this morning, Robert? Asked Mrs. Cratchit, who was brave in ribbons, which are cheap and make a goodly show for sixpence. As good as gold, said Bob, and better. You know, I do believe he's growing strong and hearty. Back came Tim, escorted by his youngest brother and sister to his stool by the fire. Bob, turning up his cuffs, compounded some hot mixture from lemons and gin. Quite a lot of gin, actually. His eldest daughters, Miss Belinda and Miss Martha Cratchit, also brave in ribbons, laid the tablecloth, and Master Peter Cratchit, his eldest son and heir, along with the younger Cratchits, went off to fetch the goose. One murmur of delight arose across the table, and Tiny Tim, egged on by his younger brothers and sisters, beat on the table with the handle of his knife and cried, "Hurrah!" "Spirit," said Scrooge, "will Tiny Tim live?"
If he be like to die,
said the spirit,
he better do it and decrease the surplus population.
Bob said he didn't believe there had ever been such a goose cooked. Its tenderness, its flavour, its size, and its cheapness were themes of universal admiration. And indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit observed with great delight, surveying one tiny atom of a bone left on the dish, they hadn't ate it all at last. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered with the Christmas pudding, blazing in half a quart of ignited brandy and bedecked with a sprig of Christmas holly. Bob Cratchit said he regarded it as Mrs. Cratchit's greatest achievement since their marriage. Merry Christmas. God bless us all. And the family re-echoed that. And God bless us everyone, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. And Mr. Scrooge. Scrooge was astonished to hear his own name spoken. To Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. The founder of the feast? The founder of the feast. He's an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man. You know he is, Robert, more than most. Shh, 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 shh. Christmas Day, my dear. Christmas? I'll drink his health for the day's sake and for yours, Robert, but not for his. A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to Mr. Scrooge. I'm sure he'll be very happy and very merry. The children drank the toast after her, but it was the first of their proceedings to have no heartiness in it. The mere mention of Scrooge's name was enough to cast a dark shadow over the party, which was not dispelled for fully 30 seconds. And after it passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before. All this time, the chestnuts and the jug had been going round and round, and by and by they had a song about a lost boy travelling in the snow. And Tiny Tim, who sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in any of this. They were not a handsome family, they were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, contented with the time. Scrooge kept his eye on them all, especially Tiny Tim, to the very last. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, as the scene vanished, to hear a hearty laugh. He said Christmas was a humbug. He did. He believed it too. Oh, he's a queer old fellow, and that's the truth of it. But who suffers from his ill whims? Himself. He takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and have dinner with us. And what's the consequence? The consequence is, Fred, that he misses a very good dinner, said Scrooge's niece, and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion. I have no patience with him, Fred. What do you say, Topper? Topper clearly had his eye on one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, the plump one with the lace tucker, not the one with the roses. And he expressed no opinion on the subject. After tea, they had games. At first, they played at blind man's buff. Nobody believed that Topper was blinded, because the way he went after that plump sister with the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature. Next, they played the game of how, where, and what. 20 couples played, young and old, and so did Scrooge, even though they couldn't see him or hear him. He begged the spirit to be allowed to stay till the last guest had departed. But the spirit, although he was delighted to see him in this humor, said it could not be done. Oh, look, a new game, spirit. Half an hour, only half an hour. The game was yes and no. Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest of them had to guess what it was. Is it an animal? Yes. Is it a live animal? Yes. Is it a savage animal? Yes. Is it a disagreeable animal? Yes. Does it grunt and growl? Sometimes it does. Yes. Does it live in London? Yes. In a menagerie? No. Is it sometimes killed in the market? No. Is it a horse? No. Is it a cow? No. Is it a dog? A pig? A bear? No. No. And no. I know what it is. Fred, I know what it is, said the plump sister with the lace tucker. It's your Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge was by now so gay and light of heart that, quite forgetting that they wouldn't be able to hear a word that he said, he wanted to make a speech thanking them all. If only the ghost would allow him. Scrooge followed the ghost. He had no choice. The phantom, who now seemed weaker, pressed onwards.
Time is drawing near.
The spirit had aged, its hair grown white. Are spirits' lives so short?
My time on this globe is very brief. It ends tonight, at midnight.
Tonight, said Scrooge. As he looked at the spirit, he dimly saw, clinging to the folds of its great green robe, what appeared to be two small children. But age seemed to have pinched and twisted their features. Are these children yours, spirit?
They are man's. The girl is want. The boy, ignorance. He has on his brow that which will doom mankind unless the writing be erased.
They were in rags, meager, scowling, wolfish. Have they no refuge, no resource? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? Scrooge looked for the ghost, but saw it no more. Instead, he beheld coming towards him, like mist on the ground, a silent shape, shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, leaving nothing visible but its outstretched hand. The spirit neither spoke nor moved. Scrooge's legs were trembling underneath him. He could hardly stand. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. The phantom said nothing, but the hand pointed straight ahead. Spirit, said Scrooge, lead on. They entered the city, or rather, the city sprang up around them. There they were, right in the heart of it, among the merchants. I don't know much about it, said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. All I know is he's dead. When did he die? Last night, I believe. I thought he'd never die. What was the matter with him? God knows. What did he do with his money? No idea. Didn't leave it to me, that's all I know. Will you go to his funeral? Well, if a decent meal is provided, I might. Cold, isn't it? Bye-bye. As the scene disappeared, Scrooge was unsure why the spirit had shown it to him. And who was the man who had died? Not Marley, surely, because the spirit was showing him things to come. As he turned these thoughts over in his mind, Scrooge was suddenly plunged into darkness. He crept along, having no idea where he might be. He seemed to be in a house. Cat was scratching at the door. Rats gnawed under the hearthstone. As his eyes adjusted to the light, he saw a bare, uncurtained bed, and on the wall, a bell. Everything else had been stripped away. Scavengers, no doubt. And then he saw, lying under a dirty, ragged sheet, the ravaged body of something. A man, bereft, unwatched, uncared for, lying there in that dark, empty house. It must have been the man the merchants were speaking of. He longed to draw back the sheet and reveal the face of the man. But he had no more power to do so than to dismiss the spectre standing at his side. Spirit, show me some tenderness connected with a death. The spirit conducted him rapidly through the streets. Before long, they reached the Cratchit's house. In an upstairs room, little Bob was hunched over a child's bed. "Tiny Tim," said Scrooge to the spirit. "Is Tiny Tim dead?" Bob kissed the little face, got up, composed himself, and went downstairs. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy young Cratchits were still as statues in a corner. "Did you find a nice little plot for him, Robert?" "Yes, my dear, very nice, very nice. I wish you could have been there. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But we will go, of course, we'll all go. I promised Tim that we'd walk there on Sunday. My child, my little child." Scrooge would like to have offered Bob some comfort, but the ghost swept unrelentingly forward. They reached an iron gate, a churchyard, overrun with grass and weeds, choked up with too much burying. Here, then, was where the wretched man, whose name he would soon discover, lay, under the ground. The spirit now stood among the graves. Pointing at one. Spirit, before I draw nearer to that stone, answer me one question. These things you have shown me, must they come to pass? Or could the future be different? The spirit was silent, immovable as ever. And Scrooge crept towards the grave. Trembling as he went. Following the spectre's finger, he read upon the stone, his own name. No. Spirit, why do you show me this if I'm beyond all hope? I'm not the man I was. I've changed. For the first time, Scrooge saw the spectre's hand falter. I will honor Christmas in my heart. I will try to live it all the year. I will live in the past, in the present, and in the future. Tell me then, that I may sponge away the writing on that stone.
in his agony. Scrooge hurled himself at the spirit and caught its hand. The spirit tried to free itself, but Scrooge, strong in entreaty, grasped it. But the spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. And Scrooge, in one last desperate attempt to reverse his fate, lunged at the spirit and saw its hood and robe shrink, collapse, and dwindle into a bedpost. His bedpost. His bed. His room. Scrooge had been sobbing violently during his conflict with the spirit, and now his cheeks were wet with tears. I am here. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Really, for a man who'd been out of practice for years, it was a splendid laugh. The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. But what day was it? Scrooge positively ran to the window. He threw it open and put his head out. Glorious sunshine. I say, he said to a boy in the street below in his Sunday clothes, what day is it? It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it then. What? Do you know the poulterer's in the next street but one on the corner? The one where the prize turkey was hanging in the window, the one that's almost as big as you? Is it still there? Yeah? Well, go and fetch it. Say it's Mr. Scrooge. Bring it back here, and I'll give you a shilling. And if you bring it back in under 5 minutes, I'll give you half a crown. The boy was off like a shot. He returned in precisely 4 minutes, 27 seconds with the bird. Scrooge said it was far too heavy, that bird, for the boy to carry. He must have a cab. There's one. I say, yes, 16 Bayham Street, Camden Town. Name of Cratchit. No, on no account say who it's from. Scrooge got ready to go out. Shaving was difficult because it requires attention, even if you want dancing while you're doing it. Scrooge danced across the floor. He danced into his clothes. He danced out into the street, where he greeted everyone with delighted smiles. Before he had gone very far, he saw one of the portly gentlemen who had come into his office the previous day, saying Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Mr. Scrooge? That is my name. I fear it may not be a pleasant one to you. Allow me to beg your pardon. And would you do me the kindness to accept? And here Scrooge whispered a certain sum into the gentleman's ear. Mr. Scrooge? Are you serious? Not a farthing less. It contains a great many back payments. Will you come to see me in my office tomorrow? Yes? Thank you. God bless you. Scrooge now turned his steps to his nephew's, Fred. Scrooge walked up and down a dozen times before he had the courage to knock. Then he made a dash, and he did it. Is your master in, my dear? Yes, sir. He's in dining room with mysteries. I'll go in. He knows me, said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining room doorknob. Fred? Yes? Who is it? It's I. Your Uncle Scrooge. Well, bless my soul. I've come for dinner. Fred, will you let me in? Let him in? It was a mercy they didn't shake his arm off. Scrooge's niece was the same. Topper was the same when he came. The plump sister was the same when she came. Wonderful party. Wonderful games. Wonderful happiness. Scrooge was early at the office next morning. If only he could catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. 9 o'clock. No Bob. $9:15. No Bob. Bob Cratchit was fully 18.5 minutes behind his time. What do you mean by coming in here at this time of morning, sir? I'm very sorry, sir. I am a little behind my time. I think you are, sir. It's only once a year, sir. It will not be repeated. I was rather making merry yesterday. We had turkey. Step this way. Cratchit. I tell you what, sir, I'm not going to put up with this sort of thing any longer. Therefore, I'm going to raise your salary. Bob Cratchit trembled. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down, holding him, and calling to the people in the courtyard for help and a straitjacket. A Merry Christmas to you, Bob. And I will raise your salary immediately. And this afternoon, we shall discuss your future over a bowl of smoking bishop. Make up the fires, Bob. Go out and buy a second coal box, will you? Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, as good a man as any in the good old city, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh. He was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good that some people did not laugh at the outset. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, living on the total abstinence principle in that regard forever after. And it was always said of Scrooge that he knew how to keep Christmas well. And may the same be said of us, and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone.